Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be discussing our assignment 13, which is titled Families. We were to create two families of students who are ELL, which are English language learners. I didn't want to give either child a name, so I just kind of developed two families. So my first family is of a third grade female student who's ELL. Her parents arrived 2 years ago from Mexico. Both parents are migrant workers and neither speak English. And there's a high probability that they also don't have legal documentation. And I think this is important to note because I think that sometimes prevents them from coming into the schools as well. My second family is of a third grade male ELL student who comes from India, but both of his parents work at a university level and they speak Hindu and English. So I'm just going to go through the process because the meetings are very similar. There's only a few things that I would do different. So as I go through the process, I would explain whether it's, what I would do different from the student whose family speaks Spanish and which, the ones that, speak Hindu and English. So before either meeting, I would gather all the information necessary to prepare for the meeting. About the student, review existing data, and make sure that that information necessary to make educational decisions is available. Mainly the student's portfolio. So this would happen for both students. I would contact the parent prior to the meeting and ask them, when they prefer to meet. What's a convenient time or a place for us to meet. And also ask the parents if they would like to invite the student to the meeting. I think this is important because depending on the student, some kids are a little bit, they understand. So I think it's good sometimes to invite the students to some of these meetings depending on the issues that they're having. I've always included my son in any meeting that I've had with the teacher so that he understands that I understand what's going on. And he also, we're kind of all in kind of understand everything that's going on. So I think sometimes it's important to include them. So when I contact the parent, I would ask if they would want to include the student or not. Then I would encourage the family to invite an advocate to the meeting, an advocate such as a family friend or a family member or a translator. In the aspect of the parents from Mexico, they wouldn't really necessarily need a translator because I speak Spanish. However, I would offer them, even though I speak Spanish, if they wanted to invite an advocate, a friend, just to make them feel a little bit more comfortable in the situation. And also, they're having a friend there or a family member, might help them understand some of the questions, or they might be able to explain, in their words, how what we're explaining about the programming and things like that. So I think that's important. It might make them also feel more comfortable having somebody else there. I would give notice of the meeting for both parents, for both groups of families, inform the parents in writing about the purpose of the meeting. And when we were on the phone, I would ask them as well, do you prefer receiving your information in, Hindu and Spanish and English? And then that way I'm sure that when I send the notice that they would be receiving it in the information or in the language that they prefer. I would confirm the attendance before, confirm who will be attending the meeting, make certain that those who need to be at the meeting will be there, and I will, give them notice of who will be there. And then that way they could also confirm with me if they're bringing an additional person or an advocate to the meeting. Like I said, we would involve the student. I would involve the student in making preparations for the meeting. To, make name tags, arrange the chairs, and give them an opportunity, to show the student also how we prepare for the meeting, if the student's going to be involved. So during the meeting, I would open the meeting by welcoming the parent, asking what language they prefer to speak in. So one of the things that I've noticed working in Miami-Dade is that I've automatically assumed when I've spoken to clients before that they want to speak in Spanish. And then I've gotten kind of feedback from that where they're like, oh, you could speak to me in English. You don't need to speak to me in Spanish. So I would first ask them, do you prefer speaking in English or Spanish, of course, if I can't speak Hindu, but always giving the people the option of what language they would prefer to speak in, because I've had bad experiences with that. If the parents have never visited the classroom, I would offer them, a short tour of the class, showing them their students' work, whether it's displayed, sharing the students' work throughout the classroom. I think it's important if they've never visited before. I would state the purpose of the meeting and introduce those who are in attendance. So once we start discussing the student's portfolio, I would affirm the student's strengths and accomplishments first. You always want to start a meeting on the positive. Because parents usually are aware of where their child's limit or what their limitations are, but I think it's good to always start on a positive. We would then present and review the assessment data, all of the information from their portfolio. If there's any terms that they don't understand, we can kind of go through those. Provide opportunities for the parents to ask questions. I would solicit input from both families, whether it's in Spanish or English. I would provide them the opportunity to share information about their child, to develop goals for them at home and at school. And also to make decisions about their placement, trying to avoid, I don't want to exclude the parents from any of the decisions that we make. We want to make sure that also we're not talking down to the parents. That can happen as well sometimes when we're talking to people that speak other languages or that are not as educated or at the level we are. Of course, when we're talking about the Hindu English family, they are at a university level, so they would understand a lot. But making sure that we're not talking down to the other parents or the parents from Mexico just because they don't speak English. You want to make sure that you listen and reflect. So sometimes when you're speaking to families from other countries or, people that speak other languages, there could be, some miscommunication, even though there's translators there. There might be a misunderstanding. So make sure that you listen and reflect and not just react on what the parents are, discussing with you, or if there's a disagreement, you want to make sure that you're staying positive. You want to treat the parents as the key decision maker. So you want to make sure that, that you make them feel like you're offering them all this information to help you make the right decisions about their children. Once you're finished, or while you're talking to the parents, you can assess, or understand the family's needs. The family's needs would vary depending, especially their involvement varies. You can't, just assume that both parents or both families would be available for any, additional help for the students. For example, both parents in the Mexican family work, but so do both parents in the university level. And both could be very busy at the university level and also working, having two parents working. So don't assume just because of their levels whether or not they can participate in other programs. You want to make sure that, when making decisions about services, consider the family's routine and their resources. Provide parents with information necessary to make decisions about their child's situation. Assess the parents, the need for information. And also, if there's any information that you're going to provide the parents, also ask them, in what language do you prefer the information? If you don't already have items printed out, or if there's still things that or resources that you see from your meeting that need to be added, then you can access that information and provide it to them in the language that they prefer. One important thing that I've actually have encountered, that after a meeting, it just kind of goes silent. So I think it's always important to plan a follow-up. Call the parent and, become, what's the conclusion of the meeting? Identify things that you guys discussed in the meeting. Has there been any progress? And if there's a need for an additional date for another meeting, I think that's great. But one of the things that I've personally dealt with that I really don't like is, like, you have a meeting, you discuss all these things, and then you never hear again from the teacher or from someone, or there's no follow-up. So I think it's important to always provide a follow-up and, maybe a thank you for coming. We discussed these items. The child has improved in these areas, but not in these. So I think it's always important to have a follow-up. So these would be my key points when having a parent-teacher conference. with students, ELL students. Thank you.